In a dusty land where nothing grew and no one smiled, there lived an old man who still believed in hope. One morning, Ravi found something small near the old well, a single seed, dry, forgotten, but to him it was a sign. When Ravi began to dig a tiny hole for the seed, the villagers laughed. "Look at him," they said. "Nothing grows here, he's lost his mind." That evening, as the sky turned red, Ravi brought a small pot of water from his hut and poured the first drop onto the dry soil. The next day and the day after, Ravi came again, same time, same pot, same hope. He watered the empty ground without fail. One day a young boy walked up to Ravi and asked, "Why do you water dead soil, grandfather?" Ravi smiled and said, "Because I see something you don't yet." That night, the boy couldn't sleep. Ravi's words echoed in his mind, "Because I see something you don't yet." Something inside the boy began to change. The next morning, the boy returned. He didn't say a word. He just sat near Ravi and watched. Days passed. The seed didn't sprout. The earth stayed dry. But Ravi and the boy returned every morning and watered it without fail. The villagers laughed louder now. "Even the boy believes him," they joked. But Ravi and the boy, they just kept coming. Every single day. Then one morning, a miracle. A tiny green sprout pushed through the cracks. The boy gasped. Ravi simply smiled. By noon, the village knew. People came, one by one, to see the tiny sprout. The same ones who mocked now stood silent. That evening, clouds gathered over the village. For the first time in years, it rained. The soil drank deeply. So did every heart. From that day, the village changed. More seeds were planted. More hands joined in. What started with one began to grow in many. Years passed. The seed became a tree. Its shade stretched wide, just like the lesson it taught: patience, hope, and the power of one small act. The boy grew into a man. People called him the new gardener of hope. But he would always say, "It all began with one seed and one old man who didn't give up." People say trees don't speak, but this one did. Not in words, but in life, in shade, in the silence it offered to tired souls. Soon, people from faraway villages came to see the tree, not just for its shade, but for the story behind it, the story of faith, patience, and quiet action. On the anniversary of the first sprout, the young gardener stood beneath the tree and said, "Now it's your turn." He handed a small seedling to a little girl, just like Ravi once did. Years later, Ravi was no longer there, but his roots, they remained, not just under the tree, but in the hearts of every child who planted, every soul who believed. Soon, the village became a garden. Trees lined the paths, flowers bloomed everywhere. The wind smelled of life because one man believed in a seed. Every breeze that passed through the trees whispered his name, Ravi, the old man who planted more than a seed. He planted a future. One day, children gathered under the great tree. Their teacher smiled and said, "Today's lesson isn't from a book, it's from the ground you sit on." And as the teacher spoke of Ravi, the children listened with wide eyes. "He planted a seed," she said, "but what grew was a forest of hope." Those who once received shade now planted it for others, and the circle of giving continued quietly, beautifully, forever. The seeds kept growing, not just into trees, but into trust, into kindness, into dreams, new roots, same soil, still full of life. They say stories fade with time, but some, like Ravi's, stay alive in the coolness of shade, in the rustle of leaves, and in every hand that dares to plant. Some write their legacy in books, others write it in the earth. Ravi's words were roots, his silence shade, his actions forever. Ravi's tree stood in one village, but his story, it traveled far, through rivers, mountains, deserts, whispered from heart to heart, seed to seed. And so, in a quiet village where no one believed, one old man did, and because he did, the whole world learned to grow again.
You may never know the weight of your smallest act. You may never see the tree that grows from your seed, but believe anyway. Water it anyway. Because somewhere, someday, someone will sit in the shade of what you dared to begin. Be the seed, be the water, be the one who believes, even when no one else does. If you felt inspired by this story, imagine what's coming next. For more powerful stories that touch your heart and grow your mind, subscribe now to Beyond Your Limits. One click today could be the start of your own transformation.